Welcome to Your Future in Sales and Marketing, a podcast that helps you make great career decisions to get the most out of your career journey. We'll introduce you to the AXR network of established senior leaders and a handpicked group of future aspiring leaders who have it all in front of them. You'll learn what it's like in the top job and how to get there. Your hosts from AXR's specialist sales and marketing recruitment team will also land bonus episodes for you on how to work with recruiters, write a resume, and smash an interview, as well as our very popular market updates. It's the podcast that has it all. You can't get this career advice anywhere else.
Welcome everyone to Your Future in Sales and Marketing. My name is Mike Dixon, Director of the AXR Sales and Marketing Practice. Today we're joined in the pod by Eddie Balemian, ANZ Market Lead for Perrigo Company, a company that not everyone in Australia might know, but one of Europe's largest consumer healthcare businesses. Welcome to the pod, Eddie. How are you?
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you. I'm really excited to hear about your journey and your story today, and to bring to life the story and journey of Perrigo as well. And that's part of the pod, is to sometimes bring brands to people that they think they know and they might not know, but they might want to think about in the future. So looking forward to that. But before we get into it, always the killer question: what is your favorite brand? And you can't pick one that you're either working on or have worked on.
I think my favorite brand still till today is the Kellogg's brand. I think I talked a little bit about it before the pod, but I remember when I was a kid, most of my family worked in the plant at Pagewood. So I still remember, midway through the month, Dad would come home with his staff purchase orders and would all rattle through the box trying to find the box of Fruit Loops and Cocoa Pops. I think still that's one of the brands that every time I go shopping, it still quite resonates quite well.
Fantastic. It's a real family history there. And as I mentioned, my son now works there in the brand marketing team. So it's definitely Aussie iconic business. Great. And a bit of where you grew up. We're going to go into your journey as we always do, the career pathway. But just give us a bit of your background before the career. Where are you from?
So I'm born in Sydney, in western suburbs. I went to school in Bankstown. So I grew up in Sydney's west most of my life. First generation Australian. So my parents were, I guess, part of the first generation migrants that came out to Australia. Got two sisters, and just a little bit about me personally. I'm married to a beautiful lady, Rachel. She's my wife, and I've got three beautiful kids as well. So that's a little bit about me personally. But I'm glad to be here, Mike.
Fantastic. Well, let's get into it. Your career is interesting, and everyone's journey is different, which is why I love doing the pods. And the feedback we get is the variety of stories and the ways in which careers are built are unique, but there's a lot of commonality across them too. Now, most general managers, as you are now, Eddie, set out with an early goal of senior leadership in mind. It's often something people think of quite early. I want to be a senior leader. What about you? Did you have any sense of your potential to get to where you are now when you started out as early days as a rep in Cadbury?
I think, Mike, I had a sense of my potential, but what I didn't have a sense of was my shortcomings and my developmental areas. And I think the other thing which I didn't really have a sense of was the process and the time it's going to take to get into a senior leader position. I think when you're quite early in your career, you look at, job titles and positions and you think, wow, being a general manager, it's such an aspirational role. But I genuinely think 20 years ago, I probably didn't even know what a general manager did.
Right.
So, it was more of an aspiration to monetize my career rather than knowing what a general manager truly does and what the responsibility is that comes with those types of roles. So I think for me, I'd say the last 20 years, I had to just grind out all my areas of development, really understand what people leadership is about and how to actually lead a successful team. So I think I understood that I had potential early on, but what I didn't really understand was the process that I was going to go through to get there.
It's interesting. The that sense of self-belief was there, but in terms of your potential, but was there anybody around you who saw it as well and was pushing and encouraging you?
I think very early on in my career, after I left Cadbury, I spent a bit of time working for a small business by the name of Frostplan. They're a fragrance and cosmetic distributor in Australia. And I think at that time I was quite fortunate to work for a leader by the name of Craig Stewart. I think he was probably one of the very first people in my career early on that actually took the time to invest in me and to help me grow. And when I say took the time to invest in me to grow, I mean like warts and all. So, something as simple as back in those days, we used to write memos to the sales team. And my English wasn't necessarily the best. My written communication wasn't the best, but Craig actually took the time to help me grow. Even how to read a P&L, like working for a big business like Cadbury, you're quite insulated from those types of things. But when you go into a small business, you're essentially, call it jack of all trades. And I think to me, that was the time where I really appreciated having someone in my career early on to invest in me and to help me grow. Not just how to manage an account or how to manage a team, but actually help me address some of my weaknesses.
And how did you get there from a career step point of view? Because we'll jump into obviously the current role in a bit, but I'm always interested in that early journey because whilst the potential piece you saw in yourself, you had somebody who kind of lit the fire a bit in Frostbrand, but Cadbury, then Sanofi, then Frostbrand. How did that career unfold in the early days?
I think, Mike, in the early days, like, to be honest, when I started my career at Cadbury as a rep, I was quite young. I was in my early 20s. And then when I became a manager, I was still quite young as well. And I think I was at that point at Cadbury where I was like, well, what's next? Quite early in my career. And then I jumped to Frostbrand. I spent a couple of years there and I was quite fortunate to have a good mentor. And it was actually at that time, I remember Craig saying to me, well, if you want to grow your career, you've got to kind of go and work for a larger business where there's going to be more opportunity for you. And that kind of pushed me into Vitaco. Not necessarily by wanting to do it, but I think it was a necessary step to take in my career. And then from Vitaco, I realized, well, I've got to probably go back into a larger business somewhere like Sanofi where I can understand how a large T1 FMCG business actually works. Because as you know, small businesses, you're kind of forced to do everything. It's just the nature of the beast. But at Sanofi, it kind of helped me refine my approach and gave me some more finesse. And then I found after that, I was like, well, what am I going to do now? I was in a national business manager role at the time, managing quite a small team. I was like, well, what's next? And I remember the role at Henkel came up and it was in the hair care part of the Henkel beauty business. And I was like, well, I'm going to give this a good try. And I did. And it was actually probably the quantum leap I needed to make in my career because it took me from being an account manager to managing one person to actually managing now a diverse team of people. So that kind of really helped me develop my people leadership skills and actually understand what leadership is about. And I think at that time, just if I'm really candid about it, I remember one of my team saying to me, geez, Eddie, you're very serious, But I think that was it wasn't serious because I wanted to be serious or being quite tough on the team. It's just I was taking my career quite seriously. But what I forgot to remember is that, people come to work and they want to enjoy work as well. And I think it was at that point in my career where I had to go, right, well, I'm serious about my career, but I have to be approachable and manage that seriousness day to day. So that kind of was the pivot at, call it Henkel. And then from Henkel, I jumped to Lactalis, and Lactalis was quite an interesting business as well, where it was their infant nutrition business. That was quite a challenging market, challenging brand. But again, it kind of pushed me to work on the softer skills. So I think sometimes, being a salesperson, you're always about delivering the sale, improving the revenue, improving the margin. But I think as you kind of get into more of those more senior roles, you realize that the softer skills are just as important as the commercial outcome. Yeah.
And I agree. Did you feel you were equipped when you started to reach senior leadership? Because at Henkel was a real, I think, transformative time for you because you performed at Henkel. You were asked to take on the acting sales director role for a period, which was a big step. And when you step into a role like that, you're running a function, even on an interim basis. Do you feel I've got everything I need here, or were you kind of learning as you went?
I think that's the beauty of leadership. If you're honest with the team around you, everybody knows that you're on a journey.
Yeah.
So I found with Henkel that I was equipped with a really good team, but what I was doing was learning along the way. And I think you can't penalize yourself for doing that. Everybody, when you take on a role, there's an element of learning that you're going to need to do to embed yourself within the company or embed yourself in a role, and that just takes time.
Yeah. And I also, something I want to touch on is a theme through this, because you've been very open, Eddie, as well, around, self-belief. And we've talked to loads of female leaders through this podcast, and who have been incredibly candid around their own journey of confidence and often feeling that dips, and sometimes they're playing this imposter type role, and it's been very inspiring to hear them talk about that. And we've often made this kind of probably unfair assumption that men don't suffer in the same way, which is actually not true. I think men are expected just to man up and take it on. But actually, I know it's something that you've talked openly about in the past, about self-belief not always being there, and you suffering in the same way. How have you coped with that, and what's it taught you?
I think maybe let me explain, when we talk about imposter syndrome, what it is, right? So I think I thought about this morning because we chatted about this heading into the pod, and I think it's about sometimes the imposter syndrome kicks in when you're in a role, or you've just been put into a role and you're quite not sure you're going to be able to fulfill what the job's expecting of you. And I think sometimes that's just for me personally, it was about my extra toughness on myself, wanting to be a perfectionist. But I think what helped me conquer imposter syndrome was being comfortable not knowing all the answers, and knowing that there is always going to be a gap between where you are today and where you want to be. I think that's one. And I think how I got through it was obviously having a good solid home life at home. So Rachel, who I spoke about before, she's been a good supporter of mine, and just having somebody who you can constantly rely on. But at the same time, I think somebody also who can keep you in check as well. I think that's quite important as well, because imposter syndrome can go one of two ways. I think you can either be too hard on yourself, or you can either be too soft on yourself. So you need to find that relative balance. I think that's quite important. I think the other one to me is just knowing that things take time. You got to be patient. It's not going to happen today. And if you know that you've got a development area in your role, I think if you keep chipping away at it every day, you will get there. But understanding that it's just not going to happen instantly.
I think it's quite insightful, the piece around balance, but in particular, the fact that, because I think there's very few people in the world who walk through with apparent ease, or they might have apparent ease, but everybody has challenges.
Yeah.
Everybody must have a component of, am I right for this? Is this right for me? But it's getting that balance of holding yourself to account in a good way, keeping that tension, where the performance is there, but so you don't step away and avoid what's in front of you, but equally you don't let it consume you at the same time. So it's a really interesting thing, and we'll come back to that, I think, as we talk, Eddie. But I really, because I think one of the things I find about leadership is that not everyone's the same. That's the whole point of the podcast. Everyone leads differently. Everyone comes up a different journey and has a different kind of upbringing and mindset, and what they bring emotionally, intellectually is a unique combination. And diversity, I think, is often kind of badged, it's kind of gender or it's race, religion. It's not. It's in so many different components. What's your take on that? And if you kind of to look at yourself, Eddie, how do you kind of differ from the traditional view, possibly, of what we might see as a senior sales leader?
I think one of the most underestimated skills in leadership is listening. I think as you grow and become more of a senior leader, what people appreciate in leaders is listening, and I think that's quite underrated. I think the other one is listening not to respond, and listening more to understand where people are coming from. I think to me, that's the most important thing about being able to bring a diverse group of people together. You're bringing people together not only that have got different backgrounds, nationalities, cultures, different life stages as well. Like, managing people who've got young kids. I've got young kids, so I'm quite empathetic to people who are trying to manage that work-life balance. And I think that's what kind of makes a leader successful, is being able to manage different life stages of their team and being able to understand that. I think, the most important thing is obviously people doing the jobs that they're hired to do, but everyone's delivery mechanism is different. And I think this is something I also struggled with early in my career, is to go, well, that's not the way I would have done it.
Yeah.
But you kind of grow, well, it doesn't have to be the way I'm doing it because it's not me doing the job. The outcome is essentially going to get there, but it's just happening in a different way because it's got someone else's approach on it.
You're so right. The empathetic perspective is a massive leadership development area. And actually, I think few people really get there. That's unfair. It takes people time to get there. That's probably a better way to put it. Because initially you see the world through your own lens, naturally, and you judge everybody by your own standards or your own values. And therefore you can get very frustrated when people don't live up to the values and standards you have, but everyone's different.
Yep.
If they've got a different set of standards and values, doesn't mean to say they're not worse than you. They're different from you. And when you can start seeing the world through another person's perspective, then the beauty of what that person can bring in terms of challenging you and your view could raise the whole game. And that's where team comes together in my point of view. And we often talk about this when we interview candidates, Eddie. One of the things that we go deep in is development areas. And people get naturally very introspective about what they think is a development area. And what we really teach them to be thinking about is your development areas actually has an impact on others. So what do others think of your development area and how do they see it? What impact does it have on them? And therefore, how do you mitigate that with them as well? And this whole idea you raised there of empathy, I think, is a super important leadership trait. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that takes time to develop as well. And it comes with maturity. As you go on your career journey, you're like, oh, geez, I didn't do that quite well.
Yeah.
I didn't really approach that situation quite well. And it kind of, you've got to self-reflect on the conversations that you're having, not just the important ones, but day to day.
Yeah.
I think for me, what is important is, after you've had a conversation with someone, is just taking the time to self-reflect on that conversation to go, well, did I approach it in the right way? Did I create a safe environment where the individual could express what they wanted to bring to the table?
Yeah, I agreed. Really interesting. Jumping back to your career, we talked briefly before about the move then from Henkel to Lactalis in a head of sales role. It was a big role, big organization. How did that move happen, and what did you get out of your time at Lactalis?
I think one of the things, well, maybe let me answer the first question, how it happened. I think I wasn't really planning on moving from Henkel, but the opportunity came up and I was asked to go for an interview. Like these things happen. Sometimes you get the call. I think that's how the conversation started. I think in terms of what I really got out of that team was, when I got at Henkel, I think engagement was running at 46%, so quite low. At Lactalis. And I think one of the things that we were able to achieve, by the time I left, we managed to get a 68 score. So it was a big quantum leap in engagement. And I think it goes back to the fundamentals that I spoke about before, where you've just got to be able to take time and listen to people. I think a lot of frustrations, particularly in sales organizations, is not being heard. And I think you got to strike the right balance. I think that was one thing that I was proud of. And I think the other one was that having people that are ready to step into my role as I left that organization as well, that was quite an accomplishment as well, where people get the opportunity to take the step up as well.
I think if you can achieve that when you move on and you feel your time is right for next, if you can move on seamlessly with the next evolution of people coming through, I think you've done, that's great leadership. If you leave a big hole, then you got a question, are you leaving at the right time? Is the job done?
Yeah.
So being able to do that, I think, is a great testament to your leadership. And I want to talk about Perrigo next, because as I said right at the start of the pod, it's a brand that not everyone knows. So people, I'm sure they've probably heard of, but for those who don't, give us the elevator pitch.
So Perrigo, we're a global consumer healthcare company. In Australia, we've just actually excitingly just created a standalone consumer healthcare business. So that was part of one of the mandates that I took on when I joined the business midway through last year. So we're an exciting brand. You'll see some of the brands that through the podcast, like we've got an exciting portfolio of ranges that talk to different consumer needs in the market. I think the exciting thing about us is we're a high growth organization and we're kind of operating at that challenger level. So not necessarily market leader in all our categories. In some of them we are, but it's kind of exciting where you've got this business that's on this phenomenal growth trajectory and you get to join and be a part of that.
Yeah. So for those of you who are listening on podcasts and not watching the video, we've got a few products out, brands out, a bit of placement. going on. But if you're on audio, just bring them to life, Fetty. What brands have we got?
So we've got in what you'll find is we've got a quit smoking range. So it helps consumers to quit smoking, nick away in grocery and nicotinol in pharmacy. We also have got Compeed. So many of you suffer from blisters, helps with blisters.
Great
and obviously
runners
cold sore.
brand.
Yeah, great runners brand. And then we also represent in Australia Lucas Pawpaw. So we distribute their brand in Australia for the Australian market, and also Tiger Balm as well. I'm sure everybody's familiar with those two brands. And the other brand that we've got is a pain brand called Heron. So everyone suffers from headaches. So we've got that in grocery as well. So we've got quite a diverse portfolio. It's quite multi-channeled. And we touch on multiple different categories. So I guess, it's quite an exciting time to be within our business.
And in rapid growth as well.
Yeah.
And you joined as head of sales, but you are more recently general manager, but called market lead is your official title. That happened quite quickly, the move up.
Yeah, it did. It was actually quite exciting. So as I said, I joined the business June last year with the intent that I would take that step at some time. That was kind of the brief that I'd been given. And I think for me, the objective of my role probably for the first 6 months was we're recently divested from our hospital business. So really setting up the consumer healthcare business. That was the mandate from probably June until November last year. And then post that, the decision was made to put me in the market lead role. And I think that's quite an exciting role. It's an exciting time. As I said, we've got a number of good brands that we're working with, and they're quite exciting categories to work in as well. So it's quite a good and diverse and challenging role.
It's exciting, and it's an entity in its own right now. So I guess that gives you a bit more autonomy and decision making within the Australia and New Zealand, or just Australia?
No, so it's Australia and New Zealand,
Yeah.
Mike. I think for us, what's good about Perrigo is we've got quite an entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
So we've got quite a big business globally. But what is really good is we empower our markets to really drive the markets and make local decisions as well. So that's quite a unique point that we've got versus some of our competitors that we compete with in our categories. So we've got a lot of decisions that locally we can make them as well to drive our brands in a meaningful way.
Fantastic. So let's take them into the role. I'm always intrigued when I meet senior leaders, and particularly somebody who's new, the general manager, and who's approaching with all the energy and that you have, but also it's been as you said, these career paths don't happen, Eddie. There's a lot of work goes in, a lot of resilience and tenacity and patience to get to this place. But so someone who's new into the role, we've talked to you about your journey to get here, and I think one of the things that comes through is there's a lot of energy goes in, there's a lot of patience. It takes time, you got to work hard to get to this role. But now you're in this role of general manager or market lead for the first time. What's your mandate? What vision have you got for the business?
I tried to summarize this in a couple of sentences, Mike. I think for me, the first vision that I had, which was to create a standalone business successfully. I think the team have done a phenomenal job delivering that. Now, the next part of our journey is, we call it kind of Perrigo 2.0. So having gone through all the transition and all the change in the last 6 months, now it's about taking our business back to basics. So having the right conversations with our customers and really going back to, I guess, call it ground zero. I think that's quite important. The other element is obviously bringing all the team together now again as a standalone business. So we've got between 30 to 35 people that work for our Australian business. And I think one of the challenges that we've got is we're quite spread geographically in some cases. So I think for me, one of the jobs I'm working on now is just being able to bring the team together on that common vision that you said. Now, what's our common vision? For us, my vision for Australia is majority of our brands are challenger brands. So we always need to have what I call that fighting mongrel in us to be able to take share and fight with our competitors in a meaningful way, but not behaving necessarily like a market leader. So some of our brands are market leaders and they'll take a different approach, but it's just about having that entrepreneurial spirit. And it goes back to my point earlier. It's that exciting space that you get to work in where we're not quite a tier one. We're just kind of this challenger brand that's got all these different brands together, and we're fighting for market share in the market.
Which can be a lot of fun. And without kind of betraying commercial secrets, what can you do differently when you're working in a small business? Because a lot of your career has been in tier ones, not exclusively. You have worked in small businesses too, but now you're leading this challenger business, which does sound exciting. What can you do that a tier one can't?
I think for us, one of the things that we can do, and we've done successfully with a couple of our brands recently, is being able to reshape the strategy quickly. So, I spoke about entrepreneurship before, like our processes aren't that difficult to get things done. So for me, that's one thing that being a challenger business, you've got to be able to have quick decision making. I think we don't have the luxury of slowing down and making slow decisions. So that's probably one thing that we do. I think the other one is having the right team of people to support that vision. Most of the team that, particularly in our sales organization, have all come from majority tier 1 businesses. So it's quite good. They're all hungry to kind of not be stuck necessarily working under that red tape and being able to agilely drive their businesses independently. So it's quite exciting. You can make a decision quite quickly.
And I guess that relates to what you see in the market from a customer or market point of view. If there's an opportunity, you can react faster than the tier 1 can, just because of the speed of decision making, the kind of less layers to go through. You can just you can have that impact fast, which is interesting for somebody who's listening to this pod thinking, I wouldn't mind a bit of that. Because tier 1s are great, but sometimes you want to really push that entrepreneurial spirit. It can be harder to really bring that to life in a larger company. Cool, great. Curious about this move to general manager market lead. We talked around this imposter syndrome before. Did you feel prepared? Did you feel ready?
I think if I go back to the comment I made before, early in my career, I found I was quite hard on myself, and that's where I was struggling with the whole imposter syndrome thing. But I think now I've come to a stage where if you've got a developmental area, it's not that you can't do the job. You can do the job itself, but you just need to be aware of where your strengths or weaknesses are and where you need to grow and focus on for growth. So one of the things, I guess, moving from a functional lead to more of a broader lead is, I think you often hear Martin Moore talk about this around mushroom syndrome. So you kind of are entrenched in sales. You just can't get yourself to get out of it because you're constantly going back to your grassroots. I think that's something that I'm just going to have to battle daily now because I've got a broader responsibility moral. So that's something that I've got to kind of constantly work on to go, well, all right, now you're not just in charge of sales anymore. You're in charge of the broader business. So decision making can't be done based on one department's needs or wants.
Must be quite tough. What was that called? The mushroom syndrome?
Yeah, mushroom syndrome. Yeah, you hear Martin Moore talk about it on some of his podcasts.
Yeah.
And it was like a light bulb moment. I went, yeah, that kind of makes sense because naturally I'm a salesperson. I want the sales, but you've kind of got to think a bit broader now as a market lead.
Comes back to this EQ empathy piece too, doesn't it? You have to see the world through others' perspectives, which is where the beauty of synergy and team comes from.
Yeah.
And the more your career progresses, the less it's about you, the more it's about the broader business.
Absolutely, Mike. And I think the other one is when you step out of a functional lead role into more of a broader role, you've got to be able to trust the other leaders that are leading their functions and actually not become an expert in their functions, trust that they're doing their roles and be able to add value and actually bring a learning approach rather than a, I guess, teaching approach. Yeah. I think that's the beauty of making the transition from a department head to more of a broader role.
Great. You mentioned you had a great mentor back at Frostland who pushed you and developed you and helped you unlock some of the potential. Now you're at kind of a more senior level, Eddie. Is it the same person you go to? Is it different people? Where do you get your input in terms of advice and insights?
I think where I get the most advice and insights from now is the actual team that I manage. I find the people that work for me directly or the department leads that work with me, I find they're the people that I often learn the most from and are able to make the biggest impact in my career. And I found the secret ingredients is being just able to listen to people. And if you listen, you will get the advice and feedback that you need to propel yourself forward and drive the business forward in a meaningful way as well.
And I know you're early into the role, so it may be slightly unfair to ask this, but I think it's interesting given that one of the themes we've talked to. Has it reset your own self-belief on what you can go on and achieve from here?
Yes, it has. And I think the other thing I've learned to accept in life is that you've got to kind of be prepared for. Some people will support you, some people won't support you, and that's perfectly fine. And I think early on in my career, you kind of expect everybody to support you. And I think I've learned through my career is that everybody's got their own journey. Everyone's, I call it fighting their own good fight. So you've kind of got to be comfortable to go, well, I'm doing what I can do today. I'm doing the best I can. I'm aware of my weaknesses. And I think back to what we spoke about, finding that balance. And I think you've just got to press forward. So I think now I'll kind of bring a different approach to the whole imposter syndrome thing.
Yeah. But there's some real strengths that are consistently showing up, Eddie. If you were to kind of say, well, look, these are the things I rely on, the personal traits I've got that I know will get me there, what would they be?
I think the thing that I always rely on, and I drive this across all the teams, is that always being honest and transparent. I think often in business, sometimes you can make the mistake of just politicizing a conversation. So I think for me, that's quite important, being honest, being truthful. I think the other one is being able to give people the space to operate. I think a lot of leaders, when you step up into different roles, you kind of make the mistake of wanting to do the work the team are meant to be doing. And that's because the team aren't doing it the way you want it done. And I think to me, that was a aha moment where I just was like, no, it doesn't need to be done my way. The team needs to do it their way. As the outcome will get there, but it's just going to come in a different way. I think the other one to me, and this is quite cliche, is, there's an old saying, my office doors are always open. But I think being approachable is another one as well, where you've got to be a leader where people can come and talk to you about anything. And they've got to be able to be comfortable to air out something that's maybe not quite working for them. I think, if I can just quickly touch on this, I had a situation a while back where one of my employees wasn't comfortable about this one situation, and I thought, no, it's not that much of a big deal. But I went, no, well, actually, it is a big deal for that person. So I need to take the time to actually sit with them to understand why it's affecting them and bothering them and actually work through it. And at the end, we're able to get to a good outcome. But I think sometimes as a leader, you can kind of dismiss things that aren't important to you, or it's not part of the strategy, or it's not part of the direction. And I think to me, that's probably been another one which I've gone, that's quite important, where people need to be able to comfortably be able to share what they're thinking and be able to air it out with you.
Good. And if flipping that round to the listeners who are trying to take a lot from this session, is that we always get through a lot of content, Eddie. What 3 pieces of career advice would you want to leave them with?
I think the number one advice I can give anybody when their career is be patient. I think that's quite understated now, particularly in the world we live in today, where everything is quite instant. Everyone's looking for instant gratification. Everyone's looking for that instant promotion. So be patient. I think the other one that's quite important, which is again underestimated, is consistency. I think there's a lot of people, particularly in sales, it happens where you've got someone that's a good performer for a short period of time, but when they don't get the gratification thereafter, the performance you can see drops. I think that's quite important. And I think it links back to patience. And I think the other one is be aware of your strengths and your weaknesses. So being truthful with yourself, sometimes as unpleasing as it might be, you need to kind of sit down with yourself sometimes and go, well, that's one area that I need to improve on, and really focus on that area and be honest with yourself. And I think if I can circle back, it's probably more than 3, but listen to the people around you. Most of the time, people want the best for you. So you've got to be able to take the criticism.
Great. Fantastic. Now, finally, where does your career go from here? I know you're new into the role, but there's a long way to go, Eddie. If you're to kind of jump into the future, where do you see yourself?
I think, Mike, it's an interesting question that you asked, right? So 20 years ago, if you had asked me that question, I would have blurted out, I want to be the managing director of a big company. I think 20 years down the track, I've learned that you've got to kind of take one day at a time. You've got to enjoy the journey. And I think that's something that I've probably forgot to do early in my career, is enjoy the journey. And, as a Christian, like, one of the important values for me is, Jesus often told us, like, sufficient for the day is its own trouble. So you've kind of got to manage one day at a time. And I think, I've got some aspirations in the future, but I think at the moment I'm just enjoying where I'm at on my journey.
Yeah. Excellent. Political answer, but I like that, Eddie. Yeah. That's great. And you never forget that, because if you always think in the future, you forget the moment.
Yeah.
And the moment's what we're here for. Yeah.
I think that's right. And that's kind of what I was trying to get to is I just enjoy it. I think a lot of us are trying to get the next promotion or trying to get the next job. And I think I'm at a stage now where I'm like, just enjoy the journey.
Yeah, I'm doing all right.
The next one will come in some shape or form, but I don't have to worry about that today. I'm just kind of enjoying the moment at the moment with the team.
I think it's been a great journey. I think you've come a long way and can't wait to see how you go with the Perrigo business. It's a good business, successful business, one that I think a lot more people now will know from this podcast and a lot more to come. So thanks, Eddie. Really enjoyed your story today.
Thank you, Mike.
Now, guys, if you're new to the pod and you've enjoyed Eddie's story, we have over 100 episodes, well over 100 episodes now. If you jump onto mix of CEOs, general managers, sales leaders, CMOs, and also future leaders sharing their career insights and advice. So from me, Mike Dixon of AXR Recruitment and Search, thank you for listening. And we'll be back soon with more episodes and insights to help your future in sales and marketing.
We hope you enjoyed today's podcast from AXR Recruitment and Search. We're passionate about helping you get the most out of your sales and marketing career. Keep listening as we bring you more career insights and advice from Australia's inspiring sales and marketing leaders. See you next time on Your Future in Sales and Marketing.